Do you ever wonder what it felt like to eat from a garden planted just to survive? Victory Garden recipes filled empty plates with hope, turning a few backyard vegetables into a family's lifeline. What did those meals taste like when survival itself was on the table? Carrot and potato soup was the quiet hero of wartime kitchens. Made from the most common root vegetables, it turned scarcity into comfort with every simmer. Carrots gave sweetness, potatoes gave body, and together they filled bowls when little else could. The broth was simple: water thickened with flour or mashed potato, seasoned with salt and a hint of onion if one was lucky enough to have it. Families gathered around steaming pots, watching the thin mixture thicken into something that felt like a meal. It was proof that nourishment didn't always require plenty, just patience and care. In Victory Garden homes, every spoonful reminded people that survival was an act of creativity. It wasn't fancy, but it warmed cold hands and tired hearts. Sometimes milk was added, sometimes a bit of butter, but even plain, it carried dignity. Carrot and potato soup was the taste of endurance, humble yet full of heart, a reminder that small things, when shared, could sustain great hope. Cornmeal. Mush was the kind of meal that built strength quietly. Just cornmeal, water, and a pinch of salt, ingredients found in almost every cupboard during the Depression and war years. It began as a thick porridge, served hot with a pat of margarine or drizzle of molasses when breakfast had to stretch. Leftovers were cooled, sliced, and fried into golden wedges for supper. Crisp on the outside and creamy inside, it could feed a family from a handful of meal. For African American and rural households, it carried a long legacy of resilience. Cornmeal had always been a friend to lean times. Mothers stirred the pot slowly, the smell of toasting corn filling the room, children waiting with tin bowls in hand. It wasn't glamorous, but it was grounding. Cornmeal mush didn't pretend to be more than it was. It simply promised warmth, fullness, and another day met with strength. Dandelion green salad was proof that food could be found where others saw weeds. In yards, alleys, and empty lots, families foraged these bitter greens, washing them clean and tossing them with vinegar, salt, and a little bacon grease if fortune allowed. It was a taste of spring renewal in hard times, something fresh amid all the canned goods and starches. The salad was sharp, earthy, and alive, the kind of flavor that reminded people life persisted even in struggle. It required no purchase, only knowledge, hands, and faith that nature provided what was needed. Children were taught to recognize the jagged leaves, to pick them before they grew tough. On rationed tables, this salad added brightness and health, packed with vitamins no ration card could buy. Dandelion green salad was resourcefulness dressed simply, a celebration of survival growing wild at one's feet. Victory Garden stew was the flavor of cooperation and care. Every ingredient came from the soil tended behind the house: carrots, beans, cabbage, and whatever else the family could coax from their small patch. Thrown together in a single pot, the stew carried not just vegetables but pride. It was more than food. It was proof of self-reliance, a quiet act of patriotism simmering on every stove. Mothers stirred with wooden spoons, tasting, adjusting, and adding whatever herbs they had dried that summer. The smell of slow-cooked greens and roots filled the air, comforting and familiar. No two batches were ever the same, yet each one felt like home. Victory Garden stew fed entire families, and sometimes neighbors too, when sharing meant survival. Every bowl told a story of effort turned into nourishment, of hands that grew hope in dark times. Potato cakes with onion were born from leftovers and turned into something golden. Mashed potatoes from the night before were mixed with chopped onions, salt, and a bit of flour, then fried in sizzling pans until crisp on both sides. The result was simple magic: soft centers surrounded by crackling crusts. Families loved their humble satisfaction, how they made even the smallest portions feel generous. Sometimes a spoonful of bacon fat or a drop of milk was added for flavor, but often they were plain, relying on the onion's sweetness to carry the dish. Eaten hot and fresh, They brought the smell of comfort to kitchens that had known hunger. Potato cakes weren't just thrift. They were triumph, a small but meaningful victory over waste. In every golden patty was a whisper of gratitude, proof that even scraps could shine when handled with care. Vegetable turnover pastries were the workers' meal disguised as a treat. Made from leftover dough and garden vegetables, they were folded into half moons, baked or fried, and wrapped for travel. The fillings varied: carrots, peas, onions, maybe a shred of meat if one was lucky, but always seasoned with ingenuity. Portable and nourishing, these hand pies followed factory workers, soldiers' wives, and children to the fields. They didn't crumble or spoil easily, making them perfect for long days when mealtime had to be carried. The first bite released steam scented with herbs and broth, a small joy in hard times. They were practical, yes, but they also felt special, like having a gift tucked in one's lunch tin. Vegetable turnovers carried both efficiency and tenderness, blending the creativity of the cook with the hunger of the day. They reminded everyone that comfort didn't need a plate, it just needed care. Oatmeal and molasses bread filled homes with a dark, comforting aroma that promised sustenance. When white sugar was rationed, molasses stepped in, richer, deeper, and full of strength. Combined with oats, it baked into a dense, hearty loaf that stayed fresh for days. Each slice was thick and satisfying, spread with margarine or dipped into soup. It was bread meant to last, both in the cupboard and in memory. The molasses gave it sweetness and a hint of smoke, making every bite taste like perseverance. Children loved the sticky crusts, while adults appreciated the fullness it brought to a lean meal. In an age when nothing came easy, oatmeal and molasses bread was the definition of enough: steady, honest, and made with patience. It was the kind of bread that could hold a family together, one slice at a time. Cabbage and apple slaw brought crispness to ration-era tables. Cabbage was plentiful, apples stored well through the cold months, and together they made a dish that brightened even the plainest meal. Sliced thin and dressed with vinegar, sugar, and a touch of mustard, it was both sweet and tangy. It required no cooking, just a knife, a bowl, and a little time. The crunch was refreshing, a contrast to the stews and boiled dishes that filled most plates. Families prized it for its vitamins, its color, and its cheer. Even when meat was scarce, a bowl of this slaw gave meals balance. It was proof that freshness didn't need luxury, only care and creativity. On Christmas or ordinary days, cabbage and apple slaw was the simple song of renewal, bright, clean, and alive with possibility. Tomato and bread casserole was the thrifty cook's answer to waste. Overripe tomatoes and stale bread found new life together, layered in a pan with herbs and a drizzle of oil. Baked until bubbling and golden, it came out soft in the middle, crisp at the edges, a perfect harmony of textures. The flavor was simple, yet satisfying, the sweetness of tomato meeting the toasted richness of bread. It stretched small harvests and turned scraps into a full meal. Families often added cheese if ration coupons allowed, or a sprinkle of onion to deepen the flavor. It was warm, filling, and comforting, everything a tired household needed at the end of the day. Tomato and bread casserole proved that thrift could taste like home, that even what seemed forgotten could be turned into something worth remembering. Parsnip hash was born from leftovers and the will to waste nothing. Chopped parsnips, onions, and potatoes were fried together until golden and fragrant, crisp on the edges and tender at the center. Sometimes an egg or scrap of meat was added, but even plain, it was satisfying. The dish was humble but hearty, served for breakfast or lunch when ingredients ran thin. The parsnips gave a faint sweetness, the onions a savory pull that made every bite feel whole. It was food for workers, families, and soldiers' wives alike, a quick meal that filled the stomach and comforted the spirit. Made in cast iron, its scent clung to the air long after the pan was clean. Parsnip hash was survival food turned delicious, a dish that turned simplicity into pride and poverty into something golden. Victory beet salad was a burst of color in a time when most plates were shades of beige. Boiled or roasted, The beets were sliced thin and tossed with vinegar and salt, sometimes a pinch of sugar if the ration book allowed. Their deep crimson hue stained every dish they touched, but that was part of their charm. They looked alive, even when everything else felt sparse. Housewives canned jars of them to last through winter, proud of the jewel-toned rows lined neatly on pantry shelves. The tang of vinegar gave them longevity, while their earthy sweetness brought balance to bland meals of potatoes and grains. Victory beet salad wasn't just about flavor. It was about morale, about bringing brightness to tables where joy had been rationed too. The beet stained fingers, cutting boards and sometimes tablecloths, but no one minded. They were the color of perseverance, the taste of something made beautiful by patience. Green bean and potato medley was a bowl of practicality and peace. It combined what every family had: a few potatoes, a handful of beans, maybe an onion if the garden was kind. Boiled together until tender, the dish was simple but satisfying, the green and white vegetables mingling in perfect harmony. A pat of butter or spoon of drippings turned it from plain to hearty. When meat was hard to find, this humble pairing became a meal on its own. Families seasoned it with salt and pepper, maybe a dash of vinegar, and served it proudly. The beans brought freshness, the potatoes brought substance, and together they carried comfort to every plate. It was the taste of summer preserved through hardship, the reminder that the simplest things could still fill a table with gratitude. Green bean and potato medley was economy at its finest. Honest food shared freely. Canned tomato relish was a taste of sunshine when winter felt endless. Made from chopped garden tomatoes, onions, vinegar, and spices, it was cooked down into a tangy, sweet preserve that brightened every meal. Housewives spent long, hot days in August sterilizing jars and stirring heavy pots, knowing the effort would pay off when cold weather came. Each jar represented foresight and care, a promise of flavor waiting on pantry shelves. A spoonful added life to bland soups, boiled potatoes, or cornbread suppers. Its color, ruby red and flecked with bits of onion, looked like joy itself. The relish wasn't just about thrift, it was about hope bottled and saved for leaner days. Children loved it spread on bread, adults stirred it into stews, and everyone tasted summer in each bite. Canned tomato relish was preservation as poetry. Simple ingredients turned into memory that lasted the whole season. Carrot marmalade was one of those recipes born from necessity and ingenuity. With citrus in short supply, cooks turned to carrots for their natural sweetness and color. Grated fine, they simmered with a few orange peels or lemon rinds, stretched with sugar substitutes like honey or syrup. The result was golden and fragrant, tasting far richer than its humble origins. Spread on bread or stirred into porridge, it added brightness to ration-weary mornings. The marmalade gleamed like captured sunlight in glass jars, its color so vibrant it seemed to glow from within. It reminded families that scarcity didn't mean dullness, that creativity could turn even a root vegetable into something close to luxury. Each spoonful tasted like optimism, a small sweetness earned through patience. Carrot marmalade was not just a spread, it was proof that survival could still sparkle. Rhubarb stew was the tart miracle of early spring. Before berries ripened or fruit was plentiful, stalks of rhubarb offered the promise of something fresh. Cooked down with what little sugar or syrup was available, it became a tangy sweet dish that brightened breakfast or dessert. Its rosy hue stood out against the gray of wartime meals, and its sharpness woke the palate like a song. Families often served it over bread pudding, porridge, or even on its own, spooned warm into chipped bowls. It was refreshment disguised as simplicity. The first pot of rhubarb stew each year marked the end of winter's hunger and the start of hope's return. Made from what was overlooked, it turned the sour into something soothing. In every bite, there was both endurance and renewal. Wartime vegetable loaf was the kind of dish that proved meat was not the only measure of satisfaction. Grated carrots, onions, potatoes, and breadcrumbs mixed with eggs formed a loaf that baked golden and savory. When sliced, it held together with pride, firm, flavorful, and nourishing. Families served it hot with gravy or cold the next day for sandwiches, It was filling, inexpensive, and adaptable. Whatever the garden gave, the loaf accepted. Housewives seasoned it with mustard or herbs, giving it a depth that defied its simplicity. It wasn't just food, it was cleverness in edible form. Every slice was a quiet rebellion against scarcity, showing that dignity could live even in ration books and empty pantries. Wartime vegetable loaf turned necessity into nourishment, one thrifty recipe at a time. Swiss chard and onion frittata was the garden's answer to hunger. Backyard hens provided eggs and leafy greens filled out the rest. The onions were sautéed until sweet, the chard folded in, and everything poured into a skillet to bake until puffed and golden. Each bite was tender, rich, and bright with freshness. It was quick to make and full of strength, the kind of meal that fueled long days of labor and hope. The frittata's simplicity made it elegant, a dish that could feed many without taking much. It captured the essence of wartime ingenuity. Make do, but make it beautiful. Whether served warm for supper or cold the next day, it brought a little bit of grace to the table. Swiss chard and onion frittata was proof that the simplest ingredients treated with care could taste like abundance. Baked stuffed onions turned the ordinary into the extraordinary. Large onions were hollowed, filled with breadcrumbs, herbs, and a drizzle of oil, then baked until the outer layers caramelized and sweetened. The aroma alone could make a meal feel grand. It was a dish of transformation, cheap, accessible, and yet elegant on the plate. For those struggling through rationing, it offered both nourishment and a touch of pride. Sometimes bits of leftover meat or cheese were mixed into the filling, but even plain, it had a richness all its own. The onions softened into golden shells, holding the heart of the meal within them. Served alongside potatoes or greens, they made even a modest dinner feel special. Baked stuffed onions showed that true cooking was never about luxury. It was about imagination. Victory carrot cookies were the sweet bite everyone needed when sugar ran low. Grated carrots gave moisture and color, honey or syrup lent gentle sweetness, and oats or flour held everything together. They baked soft, fragrant with cinnamon and nutmeg, each one a small luxury amid rationing. Children loved them for their sweetness. Adults loved them for their economy. They were treats made possible by creativity, not excess. Packed in tins or wrapped in wax paper, they traveled to school lunches and factory breaks. The bright orange crumbs and spiced scent made even gray days feel warm. Victory carrot cookies reminded everyone that joy could still be baked, even when supplies were scarce. Bean and barley soup was a bowl of quiet strength. Dried beans soaked overnight, barley added bulk, and the two simmered for hours into a thick, hearty stew. The broth turned silky, the grains tender, each spoonful deeply satisfying. It was food that worked hard, rich in protein, cheap to make, and endlessly adaptable. Families added bits of carrot, celery, or a bone for flavor, stretching whatever they had into enough for everyone. The soup was slow to cook but lasting, feeding not just hunger, but endurance. In its steam rose the scent of security, the comfort of knowing another meal was ready. Bean and barley soup was the taste of patience rewarded, a humble masterpiece of resourceful cooking. Radish leaf soup was the essence of wartime frugality. Nothing wasted, everything used. When food was scarce, even the tops of vegetables became valuable. Cooks rinsed and chopped the tender green leaves of radishes, simmering them in broth made from vegetable peels or bones. The flavor was peppery, fresh, and slightly bitter, a reminder that nourishment could come from what others overlooked. A splash of milk or a bit of flour helped thicken the broth, turning it into something heartier. Families learned to see beauty in resourcefulness. No scrap was ever thrown away. Children sometimes wrinkled their noses, but one spoonful usually softened their resistance. In homes that grew their own gardens, radish leaf soup represented the ingenuity that kept hunger at bay, a dish of quiet victory in every steaming bowl. Homemade applesauce was simplicity at its finest, a soft, golden comfort that needed nothing but time. Peeled apples simmered down with water, a pinch of sugar, and sometimes a hint of cinnamon if ration books allowed. The aroma alone made the house feel safe, even when the world outside was uncertain. Families made large batches, canning jars to last through the winter, each one a small store of sweetness. Served warm over biscuits or cold with pork, it added brightness to meals that might otherwise have been plain. Every spoonful carried the taste of care, of mothers stirring patiently at stoves while children waited with bowls. Homemade applesauce was a link between past and present, something that never needed extravagance to bring comfort. It was the flavor of home preserved in every jar. Garden vegetable chowder was the creamy illusion of abundance. Potatoes, carrots, onions, and milk came together to make something that felt far richer than it was. Thickened with flour instead of cream, it stretched the smallest ingredients into generous portions. Each spoonful carried the sweetness of the garden and the warmth of the hearth. The chowder's scent, onions sizzling in butter, broth bubbling softly, made any kitchen feel fuller. Sometimes bits of corn or beans joined the mix, depending on what the season offered. Even without meat, the soup was satisfying, rich with care and cleverness. Housewives would ladle it out with quiet pride, knowing that their resourcefulness could still fill a family's bellies. The secret was in the slow simmer, letting every vegetable release its flavor until the whole pot became more than the sum of its parts. Thick and velvety, it clung to the spoon like a promise, simple but complete. For families living off Victory Gardens, this chowder wasn't just food. It was proof that what grew from their own soil could sustain them. Each bowl carried warmth, nourishment, and the unspoken reassurance that they would get through another winter together. It was the meal of make-do turned masterpiece, proving that with enough patience and creativity, scarcity could still taste indulgent. Beet leaf sauté was one of those dishes born from pure ingenuity. When spinach was hard to find, cooks turned to the leafy tops of beets, tender, flavorful, and too precious to throw away. Sautéed with onions and a spoonful of butter or lard, they became rich and savory, their deep green color turning glossy in the pan. The stems added crunch, the leaves added depth, and the whole dish sang with humble beauty. Served alongside bread or boiled potatoes, it became a full, nourishing meal. It reminded families that waste was the enemy, and that even what seemed unimportant could become the heart of dinner. Some added a dash of vinegar or a sprinkle of salt pork for richness, while others stretched it further with grains or beans. In many homes, children didn't even realize they were eating beet greens. They simply called it country spinach. The earthy flavor grounded people in the rhythm of the land, a connection to gardens that fed both body and soul. What others might have discarded became sustenance, seasoned by necessity and pride. In a time when nothing could be taken for granted, beet leaf sauté was a quiet triumph, a meal that honored effort, respected the harvest, and found beauty in the overlooked. Stuffed bell peppers with rice and herbs turned scarcity into celebration. Without meat to fill the centers, cooks mixed rice, breadcrumbs, and herbs to create a hearty substitute. The peppers were blanched until tender, then packed full of the fragrant mixture and baked until their edges blistered. The result was colorful, satisfying, and entirely vegetarian, a dish that managed to feel luxurious on the leanest days. The rice absorbed the juices, the herbs added brightness, and the peppers stood tall like little triumphs on the plate. Every bite was proof that flavor didn't depend on wealth, only on imagination. Housewives used parsley, sage, or whatever herbs grew near the kitchen window, filling the air with fragrance as the peppers roasted. Sometimes a spoonful of tomato sauce was poured over the top to add richness, giving the illusion of a feast. Served on chipped plates, it still felt like Sunday dinner. Even children who missed the taste of meat loved the sweetness of the pepper mingling with the soft, seasoned rice. It was a dish that invited pride, a reminder that even in hard times, presentation mattered, and so did care. Stuffed bell peppers brought beauty back to the table, one vibrant serving at a time. Wartime tomato soup cake was the miracle of sweet invention. Canned tomato soup stood in for milk and eggs, giving the batter its rich moisture and faint tang. Spiced with cinnamon, nutmeg, and cloves, it baked into a soft, fragrant loaf that no one would guess came from a soup tin. The red of the tomatoes vanished in the oven, leaving behind only warmth and depth. This was dessert made from rations, a victory of creativity over limitation. Housewives exchanged the recipe like treasure, proud of its secret ingredient. Served with a dusting of powdered sugar or a drizzle of syrup, it felt indulgent even in times of restraint. Children never believed it contained soup, and adults smiled quietly, keeping the secret alive. The texture was tender, almost like gingerbread, and the scent filled homes with the feeling of comfort long missing from their days. It was often served on holidays or special Sundays when a bit of sweetness was needed most. One loaf could stretch for days, and the flavor only deepened as it sat. Tomato soup cake became a symbol of wartime resilience, a little mischief, a lot of heart, and the reminder that joy could still be baked right into survival. Cabbage and noodle skillet was the workhorse of the wartime table, cheap, filling, and comforting in every way. Shredded cabbage cooked down with onions, a little butter or drippings, and wide egg noodles to catch all the flavor. The result was sweet, savory, and soft, a simple blend of textures that made a complete meal. It drew inspiration from Eastern European roots, but became a staple in Victory Garden homes everywhere. Sometimes a sprinkle of breadcrumbs or pepper was added for texture. It was food that satisfied hunger without demanding much, turning humble ingredients into something that felt like a feast. In some homes, bits of leftover sausage or diced potatoes found their way into the pan, making the dish heartier without costing more. It cooked fast, cleaned easily, and could feed six with little more than half a head of cabbage and a handful of noodles. Children would hover by the stove, drawn in by the sweet scent of caramelizing onions. Housewives took quiet pride in it, a dish that proved you could make something out of almost nothing. For soldiers on leave or families missing loved ones overseas, it was the taste of steadiness, of home holding firm. Cabbage and noodle skillet was the perfect symbol of the era, modest, hearty, and full of quiet strength. Garden pea fritters were a rare taste of green luxury. Fresh or mashed peas were mixed with flour, eggs, and salt, then fried until golden brown on the outside and soft inside. They crackled gently in the pan, their sweet aroma drawing everyone to the kitchen. Served hot with a spoonful of vinegar or mustard, they brought texture and life to the plate. For families who grew peas in their own victory gardens, these fritters were celebration food, simple but special. They offered protein and cheer, both precious commodities during the war years. Each crisp patty was a small reminder that even the smallest harvest could feed both body and spirit. Some cooks added mashed potatoes or carrots to stretch the batter further, turning one bowl of peas into dinner for many. The bright color of the fritters made the meal feel festive, even if there wasn't much else on the table. The sound of frying, the hiss of batter meeting hot fat, was a kind of music, the music of home and effort rewarded. Served beside a cup of soup or a slice of bread, they were enough to fill a plate and a heart. Garden pea fritters were the perfect example of wartime magic, transforming simplicity into joy, one sizzling pan at a time. Homemade vegetable pickles were the pantry's secret to survival. Carrots, cucumbers, onions, and cauliflower were chopped, salted, and brined in vinegar and spice, creating jars of color and flavor that lasted through the winter. Pickling meant nothing was wasted, and every jar told a story of careful preparation. The tangy crunch brightened bland meals, cutting through starch and bringing life to the table. In wartime kitchens, these jars were pride displayed on shelves, proof of foresight and discipline. Families shared them as gifts, swapped recipes, and compared techniques. The process was work, but it was also hope in motion. Long before refrigeration, pickling had been preservation at its finest, but during rationing, it became an act of wisdom and independence. Each lid sealed shut with a small pop of triumph, another victory against hunger. Children helped pack the jars, pressing vegetables into place and waiting eagerly for the first bite weeks later. The sharp, vinegary scent filled the kitchen, mingling with the warmth of the stove and the chatter of family. When opened, the pickles added brightness to even the dullest potato or stew. They weren't just condiments, they were courage captured in glass. Vegetable pickles were resilience preserved in vinegar and salt, proof that care could be tasted long after the work was done. Apple brown. Betty turned scraps into sweetness. Stale bread was crumbled, layered with sliced apples, and drizzled with syrup or melted butter, then baked until golden and fragrant. The scent filled homes like a promise, warm, cinnamon-rich, and full of comfort. It was dessert without pretense, proof that resourcefulness could still feel indulgent. Each spoonful carried the softness of baked fruit and the crunch of toasted crumbs, a balance both humble and perfect. Families gathered around it like it was pie, grateful for anything that tasted like plenty. For many, it was a Sunday treat, simple to make, impossible to forget. The apples came from backyard trees or borrowed bushels, the bread from yesterday's loaf, the syrup made from molasses or honey, bound it all together. Children scraped their bowls clean, savoring the sweetness down to the last crumb. The smell lingered long after supper, clinging to the curtains and the air, a memory of warmth in lean times. Apple Brown Betty wasn't just a dessert. It was a story of thrift turned into tenderness, sweetness spun from nothing but heart and hope. It reminded everyone that joy, like flavor, could always be found if you knew how to make the most of what you had. Canned applesauce powder was something that hadn't really taken solid form as a concept until the war. There was a lot of use for drying fruits and vegetables as a way to help extend the shelf life of people. It was really hard for people to get vitamin C, and applesauce itself was a really good pureed form of apples that was helpful in providing exactly those kinds of vitamins that people lacked. The inherent sugar that apples had was also something that really helped the population during this time. Dehydrated applesauce was common, but to make it in the form of powder wasn't something that people had experimented with. The technique for this came about thanks to the war efforts, and it was entirely a gamble to make applesauce more transportable. Can you imagine the government delegating real-time resources and efforts to making applesauce easier to carry? It actually does things like that very often. The aim was to make something that both civilians and soldiers could benefit from, and I think they nailed it. Black pudding used to be one of the most precious desserts of America that people would chow down on every Sunday. And despite those simple joys being out of reach, people wanted to try their hand at recreating the taste and thrill of a black pudding with what was there on hand. Thus we had mock black pudding. This typically involved porridge oats or oatmeal, with thyme as the primary seasoning. If you had butter, then even better, but margarine worked just fine to give it thickness. What you had was something that did not truly capture the taste of a good black pudding pie, but was still awfully delightful to eat. It makes sense why people would go back to the original when it became a reasonable idea, though. The Great Depression was no reason to skip gelatin packets, which were pantry staples and culinary alchemy in powdered form. Gelatin was a cook's best friend because of its uncanny ability to turn liquid into solid, allowing it to stretch ingredients farther than anyone thought possible. Why was gelatin so popular during the Depression? First of all, it was cheap and easy to store. The packets could sit on the shelf indefinitely, waiting for the day when a family had to pull something out of the cupboard, something that looked like a real meal. Gelatin was even used to make mock recipes that looked like expensive foods, so families could enjoy a taste of luxury on a shoestring budget. In the 1930s, gelatin was a sign of ingenuity and resourcefulness, but today it conjures up images of wobbly Jell-O molds at family gatherings. Its culinary heyday may be over, but gelatin is a nostalgic reminder of how far creativity can go when times are hard. There's no better way of repurposing leftover mashed potatoes than making potato cakes. It's a name given to various shaped potato dishes around the world, including a patty of hashed potatoes, a fried patty of mashed potato, a fried and battered slice of potato, or a flatbread made with mashed potato and flour. These fried patties were crispy on the outside and soft on the inside, often served as a side dish or breakfast item. In northern England and some states in Australia, A thin slice of potato that was battered and deep-fried was called a potato scallop. In Australia and New Zealand, the terms potato cake, potato flip, and potato fritter were used instead. They were often flavored with onions, herbs, or cheese and served with a dollop of sour cream, or alongside other breakfast items like eggs and bacon. With the rise of hash browns, potato cakes are barely missed today. But if you ever feel like cooking something comforting, I say give this one a try. Ever thought you would have a Cassie with no meat in it? An economy loaf is just that, and we could not have named it better if you put a gun to our head. Using potatoes, peas, flour, eggs, and some basic seasoning, this was a loaf made entirely of alternatives to meat, so for vegans it is a recipe to keep in mind throughout the ages. But in the rationing-ridden times of World War II, it was a godsend to have this quick and easy loaf. It was even popular enough to be in cookbooks like The Modern Hostess, even its special patriotic edition. Roosevelt's presidency really saw some gems, right? Dried navy beans are the perfect meal when you're on a budget and want something filling and endlessly adaptable. These humble legumes were a lifesaver during the Great Depression, when meat was out of reach, providing protein and sustenance. Their small size and mild flavor made them a good base for soups and stews, baked beans, and bean patties. Navy beans were ridiculously economical as well. That single bag could feed a family for days, especially if you add rice, cornbread, or whatever odds and ends were in the pantry. They lasted practically forever on the shelf, and that made them an excellent stockpile item for lean times. The best part? These little powerhouses were nutritional dynamos, packed with fiber, protein, and iron, just what you needed to keep energy up when work was hard and food was scarce. Navy beans were transformed into savory dishes seasoned with salt pork and sweetened bean pies that were surprisingly tasty. They weren't exactly exciting, but they were reliable, and that's what mattered. Navy beans are still a staple in many kitchens today, but back then they were a symbol of survival. Depression-era families depended on them, simple, sturdy, and essential, one bowl at a time. While we're on the topic of ham, this next dish added a fruity twist to it. Yep, we're talking about ham and banana hollandaise. Sweet banana, salty ham, and rich, creamy hollandaise sauce. Some might call it adventurous, others might call it a crime against food. This dish made a lot of buzz in the 1970s, and bananas have never appeared more out of their element ever since. It was featured in McCall's Great American Recipe Card collection in 1973 and took the world by storm due to its uniqueness. The hollandaise was a creamy sauce, first born in France and was originally known as sauce Isigny, named after a small town in Normandy famous for its butter and cream. This dish really proves that in a time of desperation, anyone will eat anything. But hey, at least it was memorable. So, one of the most commonly used substitutes for sugar in the war period was easily barley malt syrup. Do you enjoy baking things? Maybe you like whipping up the odd batch of bread and cookies together, or maybe you like some other stuff people do with sugar. Candies, syrups, and lots of sweet treats wouldn't be the same without all their sweeteners. We wouldn't even have good old root beer without it. Barley malt syrup helped people in the making of all of this, including bootleg alcohol that they would make using moonshine in the comfort of their own homes. While of course its usage after the war was nothing to write home about, during the war it spread like absolute wildfire. This was also because barley malt syrup was one of the best preservatives around. It was used to make jams and other kinds of fruit preserves. The idea was to get as much as you could of what would last for as long as possible, so in that regard I get it. It was popular domestically in homes, and it gave industrial food producers a chance at a low-cost sweetener too, so really, nobody really hated this. There is nothing like taking advantage of nature's bounty with sweet dishes like Apple Brown Betty's, and if the subject is how a pie can put you in the right mood, then it is criminal not to talk about these. Usually made with apples or pears, berries, and other seasonal common fruit, the fruit would be baked, and layers of sweetened crumbs would hold it all together. The dish was the textbook definition of comfort food, and it screamed grandma's cooking in a time where many people did not know if they would see their family again. Lots of folks were suffering from malnutrition and hunger, but pies like this, which are easy to make with natural ingredients, were a blessing. Apple Brown Betties are not as widely consumed today as they were during the World War, but back in the day, people found solace in the dessert they could make with whatever little they had. The recipe is commendable and might taste weird to us today because of our modern taste. During the Great Depression, corn syrup wasn't just a sweetener, it was liquid gold. It was cheap, endlessly versatile, a pantry staple that helped stretch sugar supplies and satisfy sweet cravings when dessert options were slim. Corn syrup was a baking ingredient, but it was also a problem-solving ingredient. It sweetened oatmeal, preserved fruits, replaced expensive honey or maple syrup, and even found its way into homemade candies and frostings. Corn syrup was the next best thing for families with a sweet tooth but no budget to indulge. One of its hidden talents? It also acts as a secret weapon in making food last longer. Jams and jellies were often made with corn syrup to keep them fresh for months. It also ended up in Depression-era classics like pecan pie or molasses cookies, where it gave simple ingredients a rich, gooey texture that made them seem decadent. Modern critics might snicker at corn syrup's nutritional downsides, but during the Depression, no one cared. It was cheap, it was plentiful, and it kept families fed. It was a small but meaningful taste of happiness for kids lucky enough to get a corn syrup-laced treat. Hogshead cheese is one of the more bizarre meals on the list. Okay, before you jump to any conclusions judging from the name, this meaty meal doesn't contain any cheese or any dairy products at all. This unique delicacy originated somewhere in ancient Germany and instantly made its way to other parts of Europe. So, if not cheese, what was it actually made of? It was basically flesh from the head of a pig, typically set in aspic and usually eaten cold, at room temperature, or in a sandwich. This dish was popular in the post-war era as it made use of every part of the animal, reflecting a time when nothing went to waste. Many recipes use a bit of lemon juice to add a bit more flavor to the jelly. It has disappeared from our dinner tables and menus, and I don't think this one calls for a comeback. If you asked me if I think rabbit is a fine dining experience or easily available enough that it would work towards relieving national hunger and food shortages, I'd lean towards the former. But the truth may surprise you. Canned rabbit was actually a massive part of the military ration effort for many countries, and our dear old America wasn't any different. After all, across the globe, one thing was true about rabbits. They were an extremely good source of lean meat, and more importantly, there was also a point to keeping a good amount of rabbits. They reproduced pretty quickly, and what you hear about them is grounded in reality. While that might be a slightly jarring thought to have about your food during the war, thinking like that was necessary. It meant that rabbits were really well suited to the kind of environment the war had created, and canned meats like corned beef and Spam were sometimes made entirely out of the lean meat of the various rabbits you could find on land. Hunting them for sustenance also became a popular thing once again, and a lot of people even began to learn to hunt as a result of wanting to provide for their family by at least being able to take advantage of the local game and wildlife. It was a free and tasty source of nutrition, and that wasn't something people were going to miss out on. If people can make an entire fake fish fillet and still be pretty satisfied with it, then other meaty wonders like liver definitely are not too far off the horizon, and chopped liver substitute would eventually prove that right. Something that became incredibly popular in the war-torn landscape of America because all it took was some onions, green lentils, walnuts, and salt and pepper. You had to make a paste out of it to get the texture of chopped liver down, and in terms of taste, this was a completely new experience, yet a significantly cheaper and easier one. It was much easier to get ingredients like these than good quality liver back then, and a lot of citizens stuck with this recipe even after the dust settled because they liked how healthy of an alternative it was. Powdered milk was there to step in when fresh milk wasn't an option. Powdered milk was a marvel of food science, transforming surplus dairy into a shelf-stable product that didn't require refrigeration, a crucial feature for families without electric ice boxes during the Great Depression. Technically, a few scoops of powder whisked into the water made a liquid that resembled milk. The taste was more chalky than creamy, and the fresh stuff had a richer flavor. But powdered milk wasn't about luxury. It was about survival. It was a base for soups, sauces, and baked goods, making it one of the most versatile Depression-era pantry items. Families with children found powdered milk especially important because it meant kids got a steady supply of calcium and protein, even when fresh dairy was not available. It was also affordable, which meant it became a favorite among relief programs, which distributed it to struggling households. Powdered milk was a lifeline for families living far from the nearest dairy farm in rural areas where refrigeration was scarce. Today, powdered milk is used mostly for emergencies and backpacking trips, but it played a big role during the Great Depression. It was a symbol of ingenuity and resilience, taking something as simple as milk and turning it into a survival tool in a world of scarce resources. Corned beef hash was pretty much a mix of corned beef, potatoes, and onions. Corned beef, also known as salt beef, was popular in most Commonwealth countries during both the World Wars. Although the exact origin of corned beef is unknown, it most likely came about when people began preserving meat through salt curing. This dish was a practical way to use up leftovers and stretch food supplies, and was often served for breakfast or dinner. The best part? It was very filling at a very low cost. It is also the ultimate hangover cure before, or at least it was before, people discovered avocado toast. But let's be real, nothing beats a good plate of hash when you're craving something satisfying. Think of a crispy and tender potato cake that has the perfect crunch to it too, and you have yourself a potato flauty. Potatoes were an ingredient that the horrendous war had not taken away from people, along with other basic necessities like wheat. So dishes involving potatoes saw a huge increase in popularity, and some rather forgotten ones like potato flauties got a whole new chance at life. Originally, it is popularly believed that canal workers came up with this oldie but goldie dish when they would cook grated potatoes over fires until they were golden brown. Whether they did invent the dish or not, it definitely was a comfort food for masses everywhere, and we can easily see why too. Considered classic 40s junk food, we would love to try a good authentic potato flauty today. So besides just canned meat and the kinds of things people were out there hunting, there was also potted meat. What was potted meat? Good question, dear viewer. It's one I asked immediately too. You actually make this by cooking some really well-grounded meat that was then repackaged, sealed, and sold in a jar or a can of fat and broth and jelly. Basically, it meant that people were able to get a long-lasting source of meat that could suit everyone's household. After all, not everyone was equipped and loaded with a fridge to work with. Not everyone had a basement that would get cold enough in the winters either. Stuff like potted meat, canned meat. All of this was essential because it applied to more or less everyone. Why was it called potted meat in specific, though? Well, when you would prepare this kind of meat, you would make a lot of use of a pot. It was common to put that meat into the pot and cover it with fat. Then you would seal it and preserve it. Things like these were how most families lived during the World War. Wartime drippings were not the only instance of people using a strip of bacon to its last drop, literally. Bacon fat itself would have a lot of uses even outside of cooking, for example in arson and in making bombs. The U.S. Army would regularly request many neighborhoods and families to donate any extra bacon grease they could spare because it was key in making glycerin, which could be used to make gunpowder and bombs. The more you know about the world, the more it leaves you in awe how far human imagination can go. Bacon fat would be used again and again in different ways for cooking, but this is the first time we have heard of the kitchen coinciding with the battlefield. Hominy was a humble kitchen staple during the Great Depression, and it stretched far and wide. Hominy puffed up into soft, chewy nuggets made by soaking dried corn kernels in lye. Yes, lye, and as versatile as they were filling. Hominy may not have been glamorous, but it did the job. Hominy made its way into soups, casseroles, and even as a side dish fried. A texture party, it gave simple meals a satisfying chew. It became the base for Southern favorites like grits for those who could afford a little extra seasoning. It was a hearty, starchy savior on lean days for everyone else. Hominy was often prepared in large batches, which they dried and stored for future use. This wasn't just food, it was an investment for the long term, so you wouldn't go hungry. Making hominy wasn't exactly convenient, but it was worth it when food supplies were low. Hominy is still a staple in some cuisines, but it's long since faded from everyday American tables. But for those who lived through the Great Depression, this unassuming corn product was a lifeline. And once again, necessity is the mother of culinary invention. Ever tried hot Dr. Pepper? This warm beverage was made by heating Dr. Pepper and adding lemon slices. It was used in the war days to warm up your insides during the cold winter months. Say goodbye to hot cocoa, because hot Dr. Pepper was all the rage back in the day. It was pretty simple to make. All you had to do was heat the soda to 180 degrees in a stovetop saucepan, then pour it over a thin slice of lemon. It was introduced by the brand to increase sales during colder days when no one wanted a chilly soft drink. Smart marketing, don't you think? So, why did this drink disappear? Well, people just stick to the cold serving of Dr. Pepper now, and I'm not complaining. So we're going to start off with ration chocolate, which, when imagined, was rooted entirely in the need for something like that thanks to the war. Especially during the second one, though it was developed all the way back in the First World War. You could probably call this kind of thing the first kind of protein bar, since it was exactly like that for soldiers. They needed some way to get transportable, high-energy, high-protein nutrition that was fast and easy to eat. Plus, it needed to be easy to store and something that could deal with the fact that conditions weren't going to be ideal for a while. Actually, one of the most famous bars was made by the Hershey Company exclusively for use in wartime by soldiers. It was known as the D-Ration bar, and it was created with around 600 calories. This thing wasn't like your average chocolate bar at all. While the typical Dairy Milk or Kit Kat might start melting around a toasty 40 degrees Fahrenheit, this bar could withstand all kinds of extreme temperatures. Other rations were also developed, like the K-ration. All of this wartime food was a way for soldiers to live on the battlefield properly and last. But it was also something the government gave away to the masses when they were struggling with the effects of the war. Despite how hard it was to get normal chocolate, it wasn't that uncommon to see people with ration chocolate in their homes, though it didn't taste as good either. People that grew up during World War II will know that mixing sawdust with bread to fortify it so that your supply would last twice as long is not quite the urban myth it is made out to be today, but rather a sad fact of a dark time that people would prefer to leave in the past. This was something born purely out of necessity and a lack of basic necessities like flour. Since it was becoming so scarce across America, people's supplies of bread were running out fast and often. Bread was the only thing families had to eat too. With even that comfort gone, people took to mixing sawdust, which you could even taste in the bread. In some cases, it made the bread go bad faster, such as people when used too much of it. But in most other appliances of this technique, it worked as a filler when nothing else could be used as one. This would also set up a trend of consuming fiber in the 70s, even though most companies used cellulose fiber that was made from sawdust. So it actually does. The underdog of the Great Depression pantry was turnips, the scrappy little root vegetable that was always at every table. Turnips, with their peppery bite and rock-bottom price, became the saving grace for families who were stretching every penny. Turnips were not just a root to roast, mash, or toss into soups, but a kitchen multitasker. So many families stockpiled turnips during those lean years because they could turn a bare-bones meal into something hearty and comforting with just one turnip. Poor soil was no problem for turnips, which made them a good crop for struggling farmers. In a root cellar, they could last for months without spoiling, making them ideal for winter when other fresh vegetables were long gone. But creative cooks came up with ways to bake them into casseroles, pair them with potatoes to stretch a mash further, or pickle them for a tangy treat. Sweetened turnip puddings, for instance, surprised many with their richness. Even desserts weren't off limits. Turnips aren't a staple of the grocery cart these days, but they've worked their way into farm-to-table menus and rustic recipes. They weren't a trendy choice back then, but they survived in vegetable form. Turkey tetrazzini was a mid-century Italian-American delicacy back in the day. In 1950s through the 1980s, upscale New York City restaurants, including Mama Leone's and Sardi's, featured tetrazzini on the menu. It was a creamy pasta bake made with turkey, mushrooms, and sometimes peas, all coated in a rich white sauce and baked until bubbly. This dish was named after Italian opera singer Luisa Tetrazzini. In some variations, egg noodles were used instead. This dish was a popular way to use up leftover turkey, particularly after Thanksgiving, and it became a beloved comfort food in many American households. Today, it's less common to find it on dinner tables, but for those who remember it, turkey tetrazzini is a nostalgic reminder of family meals and holiday leftovers. Powdered malt, on the other hand, was something that also gave people another shot at making the things they used for comfort. People used powdered malt in baking and for making drinks at home, which was a pretty treasured source of that energy I was just talking about. You should never underestimate the importance of a good drink, especially because it's so good at lifting your mood up. Powdered malt also worked as a fantastic substitute for sugar, since that was pretty much rationed heavily throughout the war. Bakers either went out of business if they couldn't access it, or they relied entirely on powdered malt to keep themselves going. After all, what's a dessert without a sweetener? Malt extracts had things like glucose and maltose, which were pretty much the entire point of sugar to begin with. They were also helpful in keeping the ingredients you did have last longer. If you were starting to run just a bit low on your supply of molasses, then you would go for powdered malt, which was also easily available. So, for onions stuffed with grape nuts, you needed nothing that fancy, not even a lot of seasoning outside of your basic salt and pepper. All you needed was 1.5 cups of pork sausage meat, some melted fat, ketchup, and if you could spare some strips, then bacon. Of course, the key player, grape nuts, would come later when the onions would be chopped and diced mixed with the sausage and the other ingredients. This was then baked for around 40 minutes, and the outcome was a resounding yes from everyone at the dinner table. Dishes that were simple but incredibly effective at filling everyone and leaving them with a happy smile were the holy grail of the 40s and 50s. Barley is not glamorous, but it was a culinary workhorse during the Great Depression. This ancient grain was a go-to ingredient for families who wanted to fill empty stomachs without emptying their wallets. Its biggest strength was its versatility. It gave soups and stews heartiness, porridge a stick-to-your-ribs breakfast, and even found its way into bread and dumplings. Depression-era dishes got a comforting depth from their chewy texture and nutty flavor, proving that simple ingredients could still be satisfying. Barley was a resilient crop, growing well on poor soil and surviving harsh weather, which farmers liked because it meant they could count on it to grow even in uncertain times. It is stored beautifully once harvested, good for months in cool, dry places. Barley thus became a staple of the pantry for rural families and urban households alike. Barley wasn't just about food, it was about community. In hard times, neighbors gathered to share recipes and tips for stretching their barley supply, creating a sense of community. Barley is today a niche ingredient, celebrated for its health benefits and rustic charm. During the Depression, it was a survival tool, showing that even the most humble grains could keep a family together through the worst of days. Canned ham was like the instant ramen of foods back in the post-war days. In 1940, it started gaining traction as the miracle meat during World War II. It was also transported as an aid to Great Britain and the Soviet Union. Canned ham was nothing fancy, which was the best thing about this meal. It was perfect for busy households or people on the run. Plus, its long shelf life was like the cherry on top. Back in the day, this was a convenience food dream come true. No fuss, no muss, just a whole lot of ham. But let's be real. Fresh ham is where it's at. Unless you're stranded on a desert island, I'd stick to the deli counter. We don't need to punish ourselves with canned meat anymore, which is why this dinner has become a part of ancient history. Turnip greens were also really helpful because they meant that you could get basic things like brine and other kinds of vegetable-based dishes when you really didn't want to spend resources on anything else. Sometimes it helps to save the little bits of ham and meat, the scraps and leftovers, for when you may really end up needing it later. In times like that, it meant that people barely had anything to eat, and turnips really helped. Turnips were one of the best kinds of leafy greens for the American diet during the Second World War because you could can them, you could pickle them, you could transport them easily, and you could also bake them. If you didn't have access to any kind of oven or couldn't afford one either, then you could also make use of turnips by simply boiling them. You could serve them with mashed potatoes and honestly make a pretty decent meal out of it too. Plus, they were really popular to use during the victory gardens that had started popping up during the wartime in people's backyards. Being able to grow your own produce was a milestone achievement for the American people in times like this, and it meant that they could get a steady supply of things like turnips, at least. Which of these forgotten wartime meals would you bring back to your own kitchen? Share your favorite in the comments, and if these stories stirred a little nostalgia, don't forget to like the video and subscribe for more tastes of history worth remembering.